Proposition 20 restricts parole for certain offenses currently considered to be nonviolent, authorizes felony sentences for certain offenses currently treated only as misdemeanors, initiative statute. Plain language, toughen California's crime laws. Alright guys, you really stepped in it when you selected this video. If your shoes aren't already off, go ahead and pop them off, unbutton the top button of your jeans, pull out your muffin top, let your hair down, get comfortable. The background. This one is all about crime and criminals and the criminal justice system. If you've been watching for the past 6 or 8 years, you'll have noticed that every election cycle there's a new crime proposition each time. Up until this year, they've all been involved with loosening California's crime laws, namely Prop 47 in 2014 and Prop 57 in 2016. Prop 47 lowered certain theft-related crimes from felony to misdemeanor, and Prop 57 made more prisoners eligible for early release. This time around, the tide has changed. This proposition would actually go the other way and tighten things up again. So real quick, we're going to be discussing felonies, misdemeanors, and wobblers. Felonies are obviously the most serious type of crime. State law defines some felonies as violent or serious, or both. Examples of felonies defined as violent and serious include murder, robbery, or rape. Felonies that are not defined as violent or serious include human trafficking and selling drugs. Misdemeanors include crimes such as assault, public drunkenness, or deliberately passing gas on a police officer. If you're convicted of a felony, you could either go to county jail or receive community supervision if your record is not too bad, or you can go to state prison if you're a bad, bad boy. Or a bad, bad girl. Remember kids, the Darryl Johnson Show is an equal opportunity YouTube channel. People convicted of misdemeanors can be sentenced to county jail, county community supervision, a fine, or some combination of the three, but the sentence for misdemeanors is usually less than for felonies, obviously. Then there are wobblers. Wobblers are like the transgenders of crimes. They can be charged either as a felony or misdemeanor. They are crime fluid and are decided based on the specifics of the crime and the person's criminal history. Identity theft, spousal battery, and vehicular manslaughter would be examples of wobblers. What does it do? Proposition 20 has 4 major provisions. The first of these involves theft-related crimes. As I mentioned earlier, 2014's Prop 47 downgraded many kinds of theft to misdemeanors, but Prop 20 comes along with the old 1-2 and creates 2 new theft-related crimes. Firstly, there would now be serial theft. Any person with 2 or more past convictions for certain theft-related crimes, such as burglary, forgery, or carjacking, who is found guilty of shoplifting or petty theft involving property worth more than $250 could be charged with serial theft. Secondly, there would be organized retail theft. Any person acting with others who commits petty theft or shoplifting 2 or more times where the total value of the property stolen within 180 days exceeds $250 could be charged with organized retail theft. Both of these new crimes would be wobblers, punishable by up to 3 years in county jail, even if the person has a past conviction for a serious violent or sex crime. In addition, Proposition 20 allows some existing theft-related crimes that are generally punished as misdemeanors under Prop 47 to be punished as felonies. For example, under current law, theft of all property worth less than $950 from a store is generally required to be punished as a misdemeanor. Under Prop 20, people who steal property worth less than $950 that is not for sale, such as cash from a cash register from a store, could receive felony sentences. This could increase the amount of time people convicted of these crimes serve. For example, rather than serving up to 6 months in county jail, they could serve up to 2 to 3 years in county jail or state prison. Then there's the next change to criminal law that Prop 20 would implement: parole. After finishing a state prison term for a serious or violent crime, people go on parole and are supervised by state parole agents. Otherwise, they go on PRCS, post-release community supervision, and are supervised by that agency. If they break the rules of either of these, they may receive harsher terms or be put in county jail. This proposition makes various changes to the state parole and PRCS practices. For example, it requires probation officers to ask a judge to change the terms of supervision for people on PRCS if they have violated them for a 3rd time. In addition, the proposition requires state parole and county probation departments to exchange more information about the people they supervise. And then there's early release. People in prison have been convicted of a primary crime. This is generally the crime for which they receive the most amount of time in prison. They often serve additional time due to the facts of their case, such as if they used a gun, or for other lesser crimes they were convicted of at the same time. For example, people previously convicted of a serious or violent crime generally must serve twice the term for any new felony they commit. Prop 57 from 2016 changed the California Constitution so that prison inmates convicted of nonviolent felonies could be released after serving the sentence for their primary crime unless the state found that they posed a violent risk to the public. In 2019, 860 out of the 4,600 inmates, or 19%, were granted early release. Prop 20 would add several stipulations before an inmate could be released. It would make some inmates, such as those convicted of some types of assault or domestic violence, ineligible for early release, as well as those who pose an unreasonable risk of committing felonies that result in victims. Additional issues, such as the inmates' attitudes about their crimes, would have to be factored in before release. If an inmate is denied early release, they would have to wait 2 years before being reconsidered instead of 1 year, as is currently the case. It would allow prosecutors to request that DPH perform another review of release decisions. It would require that the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation try to locate victims to notify them of the review, even if they are not registered with the state. Lastly, Prop 20 deals with DNA collection. In California, DNA samples must be provided 1. By adults arrested for, charged with, or convicted of a felony, 2. Youth who have committed a felony, and 3. People required to register as sex offenders or arsonists. These samples are collected by state and local law enforcement agencies and submitted to the California Department of Justice, DOJ, for processing. DOJ currently receives roughly 100,000 DNA samples each year. DOJ stores the DNA profiles in a statewide DNA database and submits them to the national database. These databases are used by law enforcement to investigate crimes. This proposition requires state and local law enforcement to also collect DNA samples from adults convicted of certain misdemeanors. These crimes include shoplifting, forging checks, and certain domestic violence crimes. Long story short, Proposition 20 has 4 major provisions. It changes state law to increase criminal penalties for some theft-related crimes. It changes how people released from state prison are supervised in the community. It makes various changes to the process created by Prop 57 in 2016 for considering the release of inmates from prison. It requires state and local law enforcement to collect DNA from adults convicted of certain crimes. And here's our Prop 20 trivia question. What is the most dangerous city in California with regard to crime? Depending on whose list you use, the answer varies a little, but you'll get credit if you guess either of the top contenders, and we'll get to those later in the video. Fiscal impact. It is estimated that Prop 20 would impact more than several 100,000 people each year. Thus, it is estimated that the passage of this measure would cost tens of millions of dollars annually due to the increased amount of people that will be jailed, since there would be increased penalties for theft-related crimes, less people being released on parole, and less prisoners being released in general. There would also be several $1 million extra in court costs because more crimes would be felonies, and felonies use up more criminal justice resources. Finally, there would be a few $1 million in state and local law enforcement cost increases due to the extended use of DNA samples. It is possible that some of the above costs could be avoided if this measure serves as a deterrent. The legislative analyst bloviates extensively about all of this, so if you want to get down and dirty, I encourage you to review pages 48 and 49 of the official voter information guide. I basically gave you the Cliff Notes version, so we can get on with it. Think you got a handle on this? After you complete the election playlist, check the link below and see if you can pass the Darryl Johnson Show 2020 election test and earn your free informed voter certificate. Then the whole world, including criminals, will know that you are not a doofus in the voting booth. From Yes on Prop 20. "He slashed at me with a knife and tried to kill me," says Tara Newell, who survived a knife attack by the sociopath Dirty John. "It was brutal and terrifying, but in California, his attack wasn't a violent crime." Under California law, assault with a deadly weapon is classified as a non-violent offense, along with date rape, selling children for sex, and 19 other violent crimes. All are non-violent under the law. Non-violent crimes in California include domestic violence, exploding a bomb, shooting into a house with an intent to kill or injure people, raping an unconscious person, and beating a child so savagely it could result in a coma or death. Sex traffickers typically beat, rape, or drug their victims before selling them for sex, but in California, trafficking is a non-violent offense. Even hate crimes are considered non-violent. As a result, thousands of offenders convicted of these 22 violent crimes, including sex offenders and child molesters, are eligible for early prison release, without serving their full sentences and without their victims being warned. Proposition 20 prevents the early release of violent offenders and sexual predators by making these 22 violent crimes violent under the law and requires that victims be notified when their assailants are set free. Proposition 20's full sentence provision applies only to violent inmates who pose a risk to public safety, regardless of race or ethnicity. It does not apply to drug offenders or petty criminals and does not send more people to prison. Claims that Proposition 20 will fill our prisons with thousands of new inmates are false, says Michelle Hannessy, president of the Association of Deputy District Attorneys. It doesn't send one new person to prison. It simply requires violent offenders and sexual predators to complete their full sentences. This protects victims and gives offenders longer access to counseling, anger management, and other rehabilitation programs. Proposition 20 protects children against physical abuse and sexual exploitation, says Claus Kids founder Mark Claus. Trafficking children will finally be recognized as the violent crime it is. Proposition 20 provides additional protection against violent crime by allowing DNA collection from persons convicted of theft or drug offenses, which multiple studies show help solve more serious violent crimes like rape, robbery, and murder. California reduced penalties for theft in 2014. Since then, major theft has increased 25%, costing grocers, small business owners, retailers, homeowners, and consumers billions of dollars. Shoplifting has become so common it's seldom reported. Proposition 20 strengthens sanctions against serial theft by habitual criminals to help stop car break-ins, shoplifting, home burglaries, and other major theft. California's drug addiction crisis is fueling much of this theft. By strengthening sanctions against theft, Prop 20 helps get addicts, who are 75% of California's homeless population, off the streets and into the substance abuse and mental health programs they desperately need. It forbids convicted offenders from being sent to state prison. Instead, they'll be directed to local jail or rehabilitation programs. By targeting only violent offenders and habitual criminals, Prop 20 protects all Californians, including people of color, who studies show suffer disproportionately from violent crime. We all want to reform our justice system, but allowing violent offenders to leave prison early isn't reform. It's a threat to public safety. Voting yes on Prop 20 is a vote against hate and violence. It protects victims and ensures equal justice. It's a vote for children, victims, and survivors. It's a vote for equal justice and a safer California. From Maybe on Prop 20. Maybe instead of committing crimes and stuff, you should spend more time on paypal.me/The Darryl Johnson Show or punching in a bunch of numbers on patreon.com/The Darryl Johnson Show. Maybe you'd have more fun doing that than felonies and misdemeanors, and this doesn't ruin your life either. Maybe try it. From No on Prop 20. Stop the prison spending scam. Vote no on Prop 20. California already has lengthy sentences and strict punishments for serious and violent crime. Backers of Prop 20 are trying to scare you into rolling back effective criminal justice reforms you just passed to spend tens of millions of your taxpayer dollars on prisons. Don't be fooled. People who commit violent crimes receive severe and lengthy sentences, often life in prison. That's not what Prop 20 is about. Every year, thousands are convicted of felonies with long sentences. The problem isn't sentencing, it's what happens in prison to prepare people for release. Prop 20 could slash mental health treatment and rehabilitation programs, proven strategies to reduce repeat crime. That will make us all less safe. Crime victims, law enforcement leaders, as well as budget and rehabilitation experts oppose Prop 20 because it wastes tens of millions of dollars on prisons while cutting rehabilitation programs and support for crime victims. Prop 20 is a prison spending scam that takes us backwards. Prop 20 wastes your money on prisons. Prop 20 will spend tens of millions of taxpayer dollars, your money, on prisons. California is facing massive cuts to schools, healthcare, and other critical services. Spending tens of millions of dollars on prisons right now is a wasteful scam. Prop 20 ignores homelessness, schools, mental health, and housing. We must always do more to address crime, but Prop 20 will make things worse. Prop 20 wastes tens of millions of your taxpayer dollars on prisons that would be better spent on schools, homelessness, mental health treatment, and affordable housing. Prop 20 is extreme. Prop 20 means that theft over $250 could be charged as a felony. That's extreme, out of line with other states, and it means more teenagers and Black and Latino and low-income people could be locked up for years for low-level, non-violent crimes. Prop 20 cuts the use of rehabilitation, making us less safe. Prop 20 reduces necessary support for crime victims while overspending on prisons. Prop 20 will slash financial support available to help victims of crime recover from trauma. Prop 20 takes us backwards. California has made progress, carefully enacting modest reforms to reduce wasteful prison spending and expand rehabilitation and other alternatives that have proven to cost-effectively reduce and prevent crime. People are demanding more changes to fix unjust policies that disproportionately harm poor people and people of color. Prop 20 could repeal progress we've made and take us backwards toward the failed, wasteful, and unjust policies of the past. Prop 20 will not make our communities safer. Prop 20 will waste tens of millions of your taxpayer dollars on prisons, cut the critical services people we need, stop the prison spending scam, vote no on Prop 20. So the theme of this election is going to be unsure. There's a lot of these on here. I don't know. I don't like the direction California's been going lately with its increasingly weak crime laws, but I'm unsure about this one, firstly because of the DNA sample aspect. I don't want to start down the pathway of the government collecting and storing DNA for misdemeanors. Maybe we're fighting the wind at this point, but I still don't necessarily want to contribute. I also know we have a prison overcrowding problem. I don't like crime, obviously, but I also don't like crime being treated lightly. If you steal someone's hard-earned property, I like the idea of you getting some hard-earned time. As far as the paroling and the early releasing, I like that it still keeps these options open, it just limits them a little bit. After years of loosening crime laws, it seems California may have tipped the balance a bit far. And now the answer to our trivia question. For the most dangerous city, give yourself 2 points if you guessed either Emeryville or San Bernardino. Give yourself 1 point if you guessed Oakland, Commerce, Red Bluff, Barstow, West Hollywood, Santa Monica, Signal Hill, San Francisco, or Eureka. If you vote yes on Prop 20, you're voting to beef up criminal sentences for theft and reduce the amount of people reduced from prison each year. If you vote no on Prop 20, you're voting to keep things the same. The Darryl Johnson Show says yes on Prop 20. Have a good day.